Okay, so I'm going to make a bold statement. The red pill does not help men. Now, before you go ahead and click off the video, please let me explain, because on the surface of it, I have got absolutely nothing against a community of men getting together to discuss ways to empower men, because there's a lot of men in this world who kind of feel like they've lost their way, who don't really know what their place is in the world, and I'm supportive of people getting together to try and solve that issue. But I don't think the red pill does that, and I am here to explain exactly why that is the case. So all I ask is that you watch this video all the way through to the end, because I'm going to be making my points as clearly as possible, and if you think I'm wrong, you can just tell me in the comment section of this video and I'm not going to be offended. I'm super open to being wrong about all of this, so let me know what your thoughts are as we're going along, and let's just jump into it. So when it comes to discussing men's self-improvement, sexual strategy, dating strategies, things like that, I am not against that, because I think this is something that is underserved in almost every single man's education. Like, for example, were you taught the rules of dating in your school, or like by your dad or something like that? No. Were you taught about like male psychology and how things work and what it means to be a man and so on and so forth in school, in your church, by your peers? No, of course you weren't. No one is taught this stuff, and it's stuff that we just kind of have to figure out along the way. And so with communities like the red pill, it is a group of men who get together to try and fix that problem and empower men. But I don't think that it does that, because it has an overwhelming focus, and not just the red pill. I'm talking about everything from MGTOW to MRAs to literally all of it. They have one massive overarching focus, and that is on women. And you cannot focus on empowering men if you are just always focused on like just trash talking women as a concept. And I'm not here to say that every single person that is a part of the red pill is some disgusting misogynist, because that would be massively unfair. I know for sure that there are some people within that community that almost certainly are, but that does not account for literally everyone, right? I mean, you watching this right now, if you're part of that community, I would imagine that you do not think of yourself as a misogynist, right? I know that when I was on the fringes of it, I didn't think of myself in that way either. But this overwhelming focus on all the ways that women are screwing over men is not helpful to men. So let's take hypergamy as an example of this. So bear in mind that the red pill is supposed to be about male self-improvement and sexual strategy, dating strategy, things like that. What do men have to gain from the belief that basically all women are hypergamous super manipulators who are always looking to climb up the next rung of the ladder? All that really does is foster insecurity in men who do eventually stumble their way into a relationship. So let's make this a little bit more concrete. Let's say that you, as a man, you've worked super hard. You're making a good salary, you've got a nice car, a nice house, all of that, and you have a long-term girlfriend. You've been with her for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, you know, everything is going very well, and then you stumble into the red pill and you start to learn about this concept called hypergamy, which, by the way, on the face of it is actually backed up by a lot of data. It's just that that data is misunderstood when it comes to its application to individuals. And I'm going to do another video on that like in the future, because it is actually a very interesting topic, and there are actually a few good points to be made about our society and culture in that way. But you come to the red pill and suddenly you realize that, oh, it actually doesn't matter if you have made all this money and if you've got all this history with your girlfriend, and you know you've got all this success behind you, because either consciously or unconsciously, she is looking for the way out. And I know there's going to be some people that are going to say, well, knowledge is power, but knowledge is only really power if it's applicable and if it's actually helpful. And how does it help someone to implant in them the belief that no matter what they do, they will never be good enough to hold on to a relationship, because eventually female nature is going to take over and she's just going to leave with the next person with a slightly higher paycheck. Which, by the way, if that was the way that it actually worked in literally all relationships, or even in the vast majority of relationships, this would probably be better reflected in studies. But whilst the concept of hypergamy is indeed real, it is something that happens, I would argue that it is not something that applies to all or even most women. And in the circumstances where it does, it's not due to some kind of biological female imperative, but rather down to a lot of socio-cultural factors instead. Of course, biology and genetics are going to come into it somewhat, but we've actually come a long way from being totally dependent on our biology and our genetics. For example, we don't just leave disabled children out to die anymore. Like, we actually take care of them. This is a way that we've been able to overcome our biological programming. Helping people who are in need, people who can't help themselves, goes against our biological imperatives. We do stuff like this all the time. How many times do you see stories of people that sacrifice themselves for complete strangers? You know, some old lady has fallen onto the tracks and this young dude jumps onto the tracks, saves the old lady and gets hit by the train himself. You know, stories like this where it's like, well, that doesn't really fit our biological imperative. It's because we've been able to overcome these things to a massive extent. And so, as I said, whilst the concept of hypergamy is a real thing, it gets blown up into these massive conspiratorial proportions that it makes everything else around it look totally ridiculous. And worse still, when people see this kind of stuff and they see that if you go onto like the Red Pill subreddit, for example, if they look through that and all they can see is, okay, this person hates women, this person hates women, this person hates women, this one thinks all women are sluts, and this one thinks all women are just like psychopathic super manipulators, and okay, and that's all that they're seeing, you can kind of start to understand why people would have this negative view of the community. Because like, how often do you go onto like a Red Pill or a MGTOW subreddit or forum and see someone's actually saying, listen, you know, I've actually done something pretty good with my life, I've done X, Y, and Z, I'm super proud of myself. Like, you see it every now and then, but it is far from the norm. And because of this overwhelming focus on negativity towards women instead of on men's self-improvement, legitimate issues that men have get swallowed up in this black hole of negativity and bad optics. There would probably be more room to bring a concept to the table like hypergamy and discussing it and its effects on our modern culture if it wasn't wrapped up in so much vitriol. The Red Pill does such a bad job of marketing itself in a palatable way to the rest of society. Things like the prevailing overwhelming negative attitude towards women on these subreddits, on these forums, on these YouTube channels does nothing but present men who are involved in their own self-improvement as absolute assholes. And you can start to understand why people would view men like that if this is all they're seeing. If all they're seeing when they go onto like a YouTube channel like Better Bachelor is him finding individual stories of women being crappy and then expanding that as if that is literally all Western women, whatever that term means. And worse still, on these groups and forums are the people that are trying to push a traditional form of masculinity that simply does not work in this world anymore. Unfortunately, men are no longer in the traditional position of power that we have had since forever. The roles of men are changing and we need to change with them because things aren't going to be reversed now. The pendulum has swung too far. Our society has shifted too far forward. We are too advanced in terms of human rights for things to go back to the way that it was, where the people that were on top of everything were men. It's not going to go back that way. So we cannot simply try to revert back to our traditional model of masculinity. It doesn't work anymore. Pretty much all other subsets of people have been able to find their place in this world, and men is the group that hasn't, because we're too obsessed with these ideas that we have to be dominant and aggressive, and we have to be in charge, and we have to be leaders, and all this stuff. And whilst this stuff, like in moderation and in abstract, is fine, but when we place too much importance on these traits and downplay other traits, you know, collaboration, being in touch with your emotions, maybe being in touch with your feminine side, then we are actually doing a disservice to the evolution of what it means to be a man in 2021 or whatever modern year you're watching this video. At this point in time, traditional masculinity is something that is killing men. When you look at men's higher rates of risk taking or taking more dangerous jobs, our higher rates of suicide risk, our higher rates of drug and alcohol substance abuse, like all these things are part and parcel of a traditional masculinity that is hurting a lot of men now. And this is something that we have to discuss, and we have to have these discussions outside of the negative attitudes and vitriolic rhetoric of these communities. We cannot improve as men if all we're doing is complaining about women and feminism and how our modern Western society isn't the way that it used to be, and that we should go back to the way that things used to be because things were better back then, because men knew how to be men, whatever that means. Is there a time and a place for commentary on like female psychology and feminism and things like that, and kind of pointing out when things might go a little bit too far? Because, you know, there's always going to be people that take it way too far. Yes, there's a time and a place for that, but that should not be the overwhelming focus of male self-improvement and sexual or dating strategy. It has to be on men improving themselves first and foremost. It has to be a movement of empowerment for men, because men are not getting that. And by simply telling men, yep, I see that you're feeling disempowered right now, and it is these people's faults. They are doing this to you. Instead of saying, listen, I see that you're feeling disempowered. This is what we're going to do about it. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and you got to do this. And focus on it for the sake of itself. Focusing on self-improvement for the sake of self-improvement, not for the sake of women or owning the feminist or whatever it is. I could really go into this for like hours and hours and hours, because it is something that I feel really passionately about. And if this is something that you agree with, even if it is just on a small level and you want to discuss it more, I would really appreciate it if you were to leave a like on the video and maybe leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. This is something that I think is super important for us as men to start to talk about, and I'm hoping to start that conversation with this YouTube channel and with videos like this. So let me know what your thoughts are, and leave a like on the video as well. Subscribe if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in exploring over time, as well as learning a little bit more about self-improvement for men. And that's all I've got for this video today. Thank you very much for watching.